Cool. Thank you so much. Sorry. Thank you so much, Theo. I'm really looking forward to my session today, and thank you for kicking us off so wonderfully, Aldrich. So I'm Liz, and my talk today is about designing UX for future products. So just a bit of an introduction to who I am. I'm the head of UX and UI design at DBT. We're a software development company, does custom development. I'm busy with my PhD. I'm handing in August. It's on health humanities. Feel free to ask if you want to know more about that. Based in Pretoria. I play violin in 1800s cover band, also known as a symphony orchestra, and I love adventures. I've climbed Kilimanjaro, I've traveled to 23 countries, and I really hope that things get better in the world so that I can continue traveling sometime soon. So, on to today's topic. So, before we look at what this topic means holistically, I want to look at what designing UX generally means. So when we're designing products as UX designers, we're often, comfortably seated at our desks. We are sitting in spaces where there's usually relatively good lighting. Now, these next 2 points might have changed a little bit with working from home, but it's generally relatively quiet. So you have some music playing. There aren't that many disturbances, hopefully, depending on whether you have kids and pets. But we generally design in pretty ideal conditions. We design in a very comfortable space. But the space where people use our products, it's very often in the real, well, hopefully in the real world. So the lighting may vary. It might be very bright sunlight. It may be light at night where you can't properly see. It's very often noisy, whether it's street noise, people in a cafe talking, or at a concert. People might be walking or dancing while they're using your app, and they can be using your app in quite unexpected ways often. So in real life, there are very few ideal conditions that we're designing for these interfaces that we're working with. More and more, people are starting to look at how we design for experiences, how we incorporate these products into our everyday lives. And I found this quote while I was researching this talk, which is that the future of UX design is not on a screen, which I found a really poignant, really beautiful point. And I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind. So when we think of future products, if any of you think of future products, we think of these weird and wacky things that have come out. Some of these things are already in existence, by the way. The top right one, the hovercraft, for instance. But we think of space elevators. We think of nanobots. The bottom right, some of you might recognize as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the knife that toasts bread as it cuts it. And we think of experiences when you think of the future. So we need to start thinking, how can we actually take our user experiences and bring that into the real world? Now, luckily for us, there are already quite a few technologies that exist that allow for this. So that's what I'll be talking about and showing you some nice examples of how this is being utilized and how exciting this is for the future. So one we know and love, augmented reality. This can be used for something as simple as, seeing where a couch might look beautiful in your house. But an exciting place where it is being used is in the medical field. This is at an actual photo from Johns Hopkins neurosurgery department. They did their first augmented reality assisted operation last year, in which they used augmented reality while performing surgery to fuse a woman's spine. The doctors found this incredibly helpful because they didn't have to wonder what the angle was. The computer could actually tell them this with the helmets that they were using that have been adapted from fighter pilot helmets. So this is an incredibly exciting space for this to be used in. Next, virtual reality, another one we all know and love. This has been widely used in gaming, and I'm sure as you can see from the example on the left, interfaces and interactions in virtual reality are already quite different from everyday screens that we designed for, because you don't necessarily have a static menu. You might have an on-off button that is something that you physically turn with a wrench. Now, again, another space where this is being used very successfully is in medicine. In many places, it's being used for kids that need treatment, either with vaccines or injections, whatever it might be, where the kids are watching a video and their injections might be timed together with this video to help explain the process they're going through, or to even make it fun so that they're no longer afraid of this procedure. And that is where virtual reality becomes really exciting to me, not just for games and for fun, but for actually affecting people's lives in a real manner. Next one that I'm sure we're all familiar with, voice interfaces. Now, there is a wide variety of voice interfaces out there. Most of the big technology houses have their own sort of voice assistant, and these are incredibly helpful, especially when it comes to the point of someone needing to make phone calls where you can ask your assistant to do that for you. Now, this video is already 3 years old, but I still find this absolutely incredible.
Let's say you want to ask Google to make you a haircut appointment on Tuesday between 10 and noon. So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
Hello, how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a woman's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now? Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
So for me, that really hates making phone calls, this is definitely something that I need to look into. But just to show that voice interfaces can go so much further than just asking what time it is or what the weather is like, they can really start to assist in everyday life. The latest version of the Google Assistant that was demoed a few weeks ago actually demonstrated the assistant giving a personality to the planet Pluto and someone talking to it, asking it questions about Pluto. And it was telling them about the beautiful scenery and canyons that are available. Definitely go and check that out if you're into astronomy or voice assistants more. Now next, here we start to get into a bit more of a futuristic feeling space, if I can put it that way. We all know about smart things, and we're getting to the point where there's smart everything, to be honest. This is a really interesting example by Bosch, a concept where you have a smart surface inside your cupboard. So when it detects that you're running low on shirts, you can decide that you want to send your additional shirts to laundry, or you maybe want to buy a new one. This might be a little bit of a first world problem, but I find it a really interesting application where it starts to really interact with the environment that you find yourself in. The next one is a video by IKEA. It's a concept video, unfortunately, but it really does speak to the idea of having a kitchen in the future and what that might be like.
The table brings inanimate objects to life using smart light. A camera observes what happens on the table, and relevant graphics are projected back onto the surface. This kitchen table is about more than just dining. It is your preparation surface, hob, workbench, and children's play area. Explore creative flavor combinations. Get suggestions on what to cook based on things you already have at home. Be inspired by any tempting recipe. Set the timer to decide how much time and effort you want to spend. Place ingredients on the cutting board for advice on how best to prepare them. Use the built-in scales to get the proportions right for doughs and batters.
So it carries on to show that you could also cook on this space and set the different temperatures on it, which I find a really exciting way to go forward. You no longer need multiple surfaces for preparation and weighing and cooking. You can do everything on the same place. Next one, which does actually already start to exist in our real world, is gesture interfaces. More and more, we're seeing people wanting to interact with things with their hands, especially in situations where you might not be able to give your full attention to it in any other way. So I'll show you two videos. The first one is the Google Soli project. This video is from, I think, also 3 years ago. They have advanced on it since, and they've actually implemented it in the new Pixel phones, where you are able to use hand gestures on your Pixel phone to control your music and to answer or decline phone calls.
We can sense these interactions and we can put them to work. We can explore how well they work and how well they might work in products.
Blows your mind usually with.
It uses radio frequency to detect your hand movements and what you're doing with it. And this absolutely blows my mind, as the guy said at the end there. The next place where gesture interfaces are already quite widely used is in cars. BMW is very good with this, and you can control your media entertainment center within your car with hand gestures, which is amazing since you can't necessarily pay attention to try and find that little button to press to the next radio station.
BMW vehicles equipped with gesture control enable some functions to be operated simply by moving your hands. A camera in the roof lining detects gestures made under the rear view mirror in front of the control display. When you, for example, move your hand in a circle with only your index finger pointed forward, you can change the volume, turn clockwise to increase the volume, anti-clockwise to reduce the volume. Move your index and middle fingers apart and extend them forwards. This gesture can be individually assigned to a function.
You can also skip to songs by doing this, or backwards doing that. And there are many custom gestures that you can assign, which makes life so much easier that it becomes personalized and customized to exactly how you want to interact with it. Next, we have connected everything. So I'm sure you've all heard of the Internet of Things, the idea where you have multiple parts that are connected to each other via the internet and that allow for interaction using different capabilities of different devices. Simple example is watering your garden. I have a friend who created a system where he plugged a Raspberry Pi into a soil moisture measurement system, which then connected to his phone that could detect what the weather was like, and it could automatically decide when it should be watering his garden based on the weather forecast. So this example by HydroPoint is similar, where it connects to your smartphone and you can set it up in terms of how dry the soil should be before it starts watering itself. Another example is the Amazon Ring security drone. This came out last year, where if it detects that there is a sound in your house or something strange happening, a little drone pops up, it starts flying around your house, and it sends the video to your phone and alerts you that there might be something that you should have a look at. This is a really interesting way where more and more smart objects are starting to work together to improve our quality of life or to make us aware of things that are happening around us, and just adding a bit of simplicity, ideally, to our lives. Now, the one that really has me excited and that really seems very weird and futuristic, but does already exist to some extent, is brain interfaces, controlling an interface using merely your brain. Now, a company that's sort of at the forefront of this is Neurolink, and I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to anyone to find out that this company was founded and is driven by Elon Musk, since he likes to play in the world of strange things. And their company, this Neurolink, works on the basis that it's implanted into one or both brain hemispheres, connects via Bluetooth to a smartphone, And these are some of the videos that they have on their website, concept videos showing that how you would be able to actually control a phone and control an interface using merely your brain. And you can even start to play games with these, which then rewards you and trains both your brain and this interface in terms of how it should be interacting. Now, they've taken it a step further, and the following video was released a month ago, or actually earlier this month. It is of a 9-year-old macaque monkey, which they implanted 2 Neurolink devices, one in each brain hemisphere, and they've taught this monkey how to actually interact using only its brain.
Pager uses the joystick to move a cursor to targets presented on the screen. As he's playing this game, we are wirelessly streaming in real time the firing rates from thousands of neurons to a computer. Using these data, we calibrate the decoder by mathematically modeling the relationship between patterns of neural activity and the different joystick movements they produce. After only a few minutes of calibration, we can use the output from the decoder to move the cursor instead of the joystick. Pager still moves the joystick out of habit, but as you can see, it's unplugged. He's controlling the cursor entirely with decoded neural activity. Our goal is to enable a person with paralysis to use a computer or phone with their brain activity alone.
Now, that's a really exciting opportunity and a really great way where it can be used to actually improve people's lives. Now, they took it a little step further with the deer monkey.
One of the things the Neurolinks allow Pager to do is to play his favorite video game, Pong. To control his paddle on the right side of the screen, Pager simply thinks about moving his hand up or down. We've removed the joystick altogether. Now that he's up to speed, let's increase the difficulty and see how well Pager can play with the Neurolink. As you can see, Pager is amazingly good at Mind Pong. He's focused, and he's playing entirely of his own volition.
This absolutely blows my mind, and I find it a really incredibly exciting opportunity that we have that we can start moving towards. Now, the question does start to come in, the ethical implications of doing this, which is why I figured we would just spend a brief moment talking about ethical design and where that actually fits in. As we are continuing along this journey of becoming more mature as design practitioners, of growing the design practice in South Africa, I find it's more and more important to start talking about the ethical implications that our designs have. I was actually part of a panel discussion about ethical design last week, and more people are becoming aware of this and realizing that we as designers have a very big responsibility for the teams we design in, the products that we design, and also what we choose to design. So one of the big topics I would say is diversity and inclusion. Whether this is looking at race, gender, sexuality, neurodiversity, or disability, we need to cater for different kinds of people in our designs, and we need to include different kinds of people in our designs and in our design teams, because it gives us a more holistic view and a more diverse view of the people we're designing for. It is also Pride Month at the moment, so happy Pride Month, everyone. I'm slightly obsessed with Lego, and I desperately need this Lego set, which is a real thing you can buy for this Pride Month. So remember to think of all different kinds of people when you are designing, and try and make your teams as diverse as possible to cater for different points of view, especially in South Africa, where we have such a diverse group of people in our country that we need to create for. It's also really important to think about sustainable design. Sustainable design is coming more and more to the forefront, and I feel like the younger generation especially is really driving this, which is amazing. Now, I'm not just talking about sustainable design in terms of packaging or recycling or anything like that. This image is from Fjord. In 2020, they introduced this concept called life-centered design, which is a term that was coined by George Thackeray, a researcher. And it points to the moving away of this term that we as designers are slightly obsessed with, which is human-centered design. Now, I say this as someone whose PhD is on human-centered design. I feel we as designers are slightly obsessed with human-centered design, and we have started to forget that we as humans are not the center of the universe. We might be the center of our own universe, but we need to start thinking about how our design impacts those around us, the people around us, our society. And the products we design might be human-centered, but their effects may not be. For instance, Airbnb has been shown to actually drive up the property prices in a lot of places. So where their app might be beautifully human-centered, the effect that the company is creating is not. Uber also, for instance, tends to employ their drivers as contractors instead of permanent employees, which means that in South Africa, they can fire them at will, which is not something that is generally allowed in our company, especially for permanent employees. So they are not afforded the protections of permanent staff. It also means that there's no limitation in terms of the hours that they work, and it also allows them to adjust their remuneration however they would like. So the companies that we are creating for, the products that we are creating for, we need to think of how this affects the people around us, the environments in which we live, and not just whether your interface is human-centered. Then last but not least, I would encourage everyone to try and do a Black Mirror test with the products that you are designing. Black Mirror, for those of you who don't know, it's a Netflix series, and each episode focuses on a way that it's a dystopian futuristic show. So each episode focuses on a way that technology has somehow horribly messed up people's lives or has influenced people in a bad way. It's really, really well written and created, so I would encourage you to go and watch it. But it does point out the ways that technology can potentially really, really be bad. So when you are creating products, try and think of the worst way that someone could be using this and try and design against that to ensure that that doesn't happen. As an example, if you have a joint bank account, most banks only allow one person to be able to log into that with a phone. This opens it up to very easily be used for financial abuse, where one partner is in control of an entire relationship's money and the other person can't access it. Now, I'm sure that this was never an intended effect, but it is a possible effect. Many of the home devices or home assistant devices like Amazon Alexa allows you to drop into the speaker without anyone realizing it. So it's very easy to spy on your spouse and to become very controlling in that manner. Again, probably never an intended effect, but it does have that effect. So really try to think of the implications of things that you're designing and how people can potentially misuse it, and then try and include ways that people won't be able to do that. Now, to end off on a positive note, I have a quick video by Satya Nadella. He's the CEO of Microsoft. The Microsoft Microsoft Build Conference, was last week. And in his keynote speech, he spoke about the ways that Microsoft's products are actually allowing for this integrated, interconnected future. And this is an example that already exists, and I find absolutely inspiring.
Sam George will share one of my favorite examples of how Anheuser-Busch InBev has used our metaverse stack to track every bottle from the wheat field through the manufacturing and distribution processes. They've created this complete digital twin of their breweries and supply chain, as you can see here. The digital twin is synchronized with their physical brewery. It understands these complex relationships between equipment and natural ingredients. It enables the brewmasters to make adjustments based on dynamic conditions. It maintains uptime on many machines required during the packaging process. It tracks the entire supply chain to reduce emissions. Deep reinforcement learning works with digital twins to help packing line operators detect and automatically compensate for bottlenecks. They even use mixed reality with their digital twin for remote assistance.
So I just find this so inspiring because this already exists. The future is here, if I can call it that. So thank you so much. Any questions for me?
Thank you so much for that, Lizette. So we have Yaku on. Funny enough, we were just speaking about Yaku. He's got a question. When designing for future interfaces, are there prototyping software packages available for interfaces such as voice, AR, or VR? Or do you have to develop it on the final platform to actually visualize the design and conduct user testing? That's from Yaku.
Honestly, I'm not sure. I know that there are some platforms available where you can start to prototype this, but they're not very well developed. People tend to think of the final outcomes and not consider how we as designers are going to get there. So I would say that that's a very important area that we need to focus on and to try and figure how are we actually going to help people prototype these. When it comes to things like voice interfaces, when looking at those conversation flows, that is something that's becoming very important and very prominent is conversational design. I've had a few clients ask us now for conversational designers, and that's not an official title, if I can put it that way, that really exists in South Africa at least. But if you're good at copywriting and like conversations, I would suggest definitely look into conversational design, because that lends itself both to chatbots, to voice interfaces, and just trying to think how these different things will interact. Things like voice interfaces, it does also very heavily rely on NLP and NLU, neuro-linguistic understanding and neuro-linguistic programming, where it is tied into machine learning and artificial intelligence, that it will actually understand what you're asking. So it's not necessarily always possible to prototype those because it's working with a artificial intelligence, but it is still important to guide those in a certain direction. So you would have to work very closely with the machine learning engineers in terms of how to actually get that right. But in terms of things like gesture interfaces, I know that BMW specifically has a very large lab where they are working on this. I was lucky enough to attend a conference talk last year where some of the BMW designers were talking about they have very interesting standards that they have to adhere to while doing this. They have 5 levels of abstraction and automation that they have to work with the engineers in order to get these right. So once you go into the space of these interfaces, or experiences, I should rather say, you suddenly have to work very closely with the engineers or the software developers or the machine learning engineers in order to really understand how your product will be used. So there's a lot more required from you as a designer. It's no longer just in a realm that we can control looking at an interface.
Thank you for that. So we have another question here from Marlon James, and he wants to know, do you think SA is close to the future of design? We still seem to be stuck at banks and fintech companies.
That's true. Yeah, I think most of us are probably working at banks and fintech companies as designers, because that's also where the money is. They have a lot of money, so they are able to actually advance their design practices. So some of the most mature design practices and design understandings you'll have even amongst business people and CEOs, C-suite level people, is generally amongst the banks, because they have the money to invest in this and they see the value in it because it is such a competitive market. It is very difficult. When you look at, say, the medical applications of these technologies like AR and VR, that's not really something that is happening in South Africa, just because a lot of our people don't have the money to be able to utilize those, and it's not really being developed in our country. Now, that's actually what my PhD is looking at, is the fact that we are adapting a lot of technology from Europe and from America for use in South Africa, especially in our public sector. And it doesn't always work because we have different contexts here. And a lot of these things need to be considered in our context in order for it to work at its best. So South Africa still has a long way to go. I think as a country and as a society, we are not nearly as advanced in terms of design practice as other countries, not because we don't have the skill or not because we don't have amazing world-class designers. It is simply because we need, our general population still needs a lot of education in terms of design maturity. And we're working towards that, especially also because we have such a diverse population. What iconography might mean to one person might mean something completely different to someone of a different culture. And we're still working towards growing that. Also, the fact that there are still a lot of people using feature phones. That I saw from the previous talk, someone mentioned that, you know, half South Africa don't even know what a QR code is. And that's very true. There's still a lot of education that needs to happen to get our country to that next level. But I think we're moving towards it. I think a lot of the technologies that I spoke about aren't necessarily implemented in spaces in South Africa yet, but I think we as designers need to help drive that and to tell our clients that I see a really exciting opportunity for our company to be using this technology for our product because it will make it better. And once people start to see that value, they'll start to invest in it. So there's still a ways to go, but I definitely think we should be promoting it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think it's quite interesting, though. If you look at mobile money, like the likes of M-Pesa, and how they're designing around just Africa as such. I mean, it might not be forward thinking. We might not have the best QR codes or mobiles, but they're definitely doing it in Africa. So that's an interesting use case that we could definitely learn from as well.
I completely agree with M-Pesa. It was such an interesting thing that they did because they basically skipped over ATMs because they didn't have the infrastructure. So they just went straight to digital to allow digital payments. So I think there's a lot of innovation that is coming from Africa and has the potential to come from Africa. We just need to encourage people to think differently and really embrace where we come from and not always try to adapt to European or American or any Western or international standards, because we have such a unique point of view. And I think we really need to embrace that.
Absolutely. Designing for Africa by Africans is really the motto.
Definitely.
So this is the last two questions, and we're going to go on a bit of a break. So the next one is from Mone Fenta, and he wants to know, do you have an opinion or insight on the role of blockchain technology in the UX field? And by the way, Mone, sorry, before you answer that question, I'm quite interested to work with anybody that's doing work in the crypto field around user experience. I just want to sort of hack some ideas as well. So
with this question, I know Murne, we studied together. He's the head of the interaction school at Open Window. I honestly don't know if he's joking or not, just because I know him. I think that blockchain definitely has an important role that it can play in terms of securing data and having a decentralized way of accessing things. I do think that blockchain is also a very big buzzword, and I myself don't fully understand how it works. My boyfriend, who's a dev, has tried to explain it to me many times, and I genuinely, I'm not sure. I think that it does have an interesting role to play, especially when it comes to being able to transfer money legally, that you've legally obtained, I will say that, for international use. So if I am traveling to Paris, for instance, and I want to access my money that side, instead of having to transform it into a different currency, I can go that side and I can draw money from a Bitcoin ATM, which doesn't have the transaction fees and doesn't have the inherent fees that are associated with converting currency, which is really great. But unfortunately, blockchain does have a lot of nefarious uses in terms of money laundering, in terms of all sorts of things, because the transactions can't be, can't be tracked. So I think there is definitely potential for it to be very useful in some instances, but I think that a lot of people are just trying to push it into products because they know it's a buzzword and they're trying to figure out how to use it. So if your client comes to you and wants to use blockchain, ask them why. If they say because everyone is, that's probably not a good reason. But do explore it, try and see if there is a way that it can be valuable to you, but not everything should fit in everywhere just because it's the latest trend.
Yeah, totally. So just to add on to the whole blockchain, I think the money side of things is a small aspect of what the blockchain has really been designed for. I think just to put everything in context, I'm sure probably most people know it anyway. If you look at South Africa at this moment in time, I think it's really just taking that third party out of the equation. For example, if you were to sell me your house, Lizette, we really want to take that third party, that intermediary out of it. And this is where, you can transact on the blockchain and everything will be recorded on the decentralized ledger or distributed ledger. So, there's huge cases for it, especially when it comes to the legal side of things. I mean, we could literally sign a smart contract online without having to go through the whole legal process. So it will be between the two of us. So, I mean, we could go on and about this, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The monetary side of things is really the scary part of it, but it is a small aspect of it. So we definitely use it.
Fascinating. I wasn't aware of that. So our government every government is trying very hard to legislate blockchain for that reason, because it cuts them and taxes out of the equation.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is the last question, then we're going to go on a bit of a break. Do you think the tech industry will start placing more focus on privacy concerns in the near future, for example, with voice assistants that are always listening? So in the likes of Siri and I don't know what's the one they use for Android.
Well, Android can be like it's Google Assistant often. I think more and more companies and countries are starting to pay attention to those privacy concerns. Something as simple as a few years ago that requirement came in that all European countries need to ask your permission for cookies. So that's why now on every single website, you always get asked for cookies, and if you want to accept cookies. And then I feel like the cookie monster because I want all the cookies. And I think that that's definitely something that people are starting to pay more attention to. I actually had a section in this talk about privacy and data concerns, but then the talk got too long because I feel that that could be a whole conversation on its own. In South Africa, we're lucky to have the POPI Act, the Privacy of Personal Information Act. And that is quite a comprehensive law. I know all of our developers are always looking to make sure that they are adhering to the POPI standards, because there are very, very big repercussions for companies that accidentally expose their customers' data. It could run from having to pay millions of rands of fines to sanctions being imposed on the company, to the CEO or whoever is responsible in terms of the tech space, actually going to jail from anything from 10 months to 10 years. So in South Africa, I feel like we have quite good protection in terms of privacy. And I think in terms of these new technologies, it definitely is something to be considered. I think with the voice assistants, you can actually, there are settings where you can choose, do you want to send this feedback directly to the developers on their side, which helps them to improve their services. because they can use that to train their machine learning model a bit further, or you can opt out of it. Now, on the one hand, I completely get it, and I completely understand that we should be taking responsibility for the privacy of our information and of our data. But I do also feel that people are overreacting to some degree. That people always are constantly sending out those things of WhatsApp has changed its things again. And what it comes down to is when a company is collecting your data, and I say this as someone who's had long conversations with a friend who's a researcher in AI and machine learning. When a company is collecting your data, for the most part, they don't look at you as an individual and looking to necessarily, expose what you are saying or thinking or hearing or whatever it might be. They're using that as a bigger data set. So they don't care about you as an individual. And most of the time, that data is not necessarily being used for nefarious purposes. They're just training it and using you as a persona, essentially, that is buying these kinds of things, interested in these kinds of things, sorry, and engaging with you in that manner. So while it is important to consider the privacy concerns, and us as designers have that responsibility to consider the privacy concerns, as an individual, I think that in a lot of cases, people are freaking out too much about things that won't actually affect them that much. But most apps and websites and interactions do have that option that allows you to go into the privacy settings and really choose what you want to share with the company or not. The latest iOS update, for instance, it now tells you when an app wants to use your data, and you can tell it, no, I don't want to share it, which is kind of creepy because every single one of my apps now asks me that, and it's made me realize that every single one of my apps has been sharing my data or my use patterns or whatever it might be. But yes, so that's my 2 cents on that. I hope that's more or less answered it.
Okay, thank you. Lizette, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your help. If everybody can just give a huge round of applause in the chat group, I think you can either clap or just press Y. Thank you so much. You have a lovely day and good luck with your dissertation. It's due in August, you said? Yes, I submitted my intention to submit yesterday, which means the university now has 3 months to get my examiners ready. And yes, so hopefully by end of this year, I will be a doctor. Perfect, perfect, perfect. I can't wait to be calling you Dr. Lizette Spangenberg. Okay, brilliant. Listen, have a lovely day. Guys, we're going to break from now till about 10 to 11, and we'll chat to everyone then. Thanks to you again, Lizette. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.